Good morning. It's good to be with you this morning, and whether you are here in the sanctuary or you're watching from home, welcome. This month, while our lead minister, Reverend James Cabal-Komodo, is away on some very well-deserved vacation, I am offering a three-part sermon series called Preaching with the Stars. Each week we've been reflecting together on one of the historical sermons and other texts of our Unitarian Universalist heritage. And as we settle into our time of worship together with this week's exploration of our Unitarian Universalist roots, I offer these words by the UU minister, Reverend Kathleen McTeague, from Sabbath Home in Shine and Shadow. May they help center our minds and our hearts this morning. Here in the refuge of this Sabbath home, we turn our busy minds toward silence and our full hearts toward one another. We move together through the mysteries, the bright sunshine of birth and the shadowed questions of death. In our slow journey between the two, we will be wounded and we will be showered with grace, amazing, unending. Even in our sorrows, we feel our lives cradled in holiness we cannot comprehend. And though we each journey within a vast loneliness, the promise we offer here is that we do not journey alone. This is a holy place in which we gather, the light of the earth brought in and held, touched then by an answering light, the flame on a chalice, the flicker of a candle, the lamps of our open faces brought near. In this place of silence and celebration, solemnity and music, we make a sanctuary and name our home. Into this home, we bring our hunger for awakening, we bring our compassionate hearts and a will toward justice. Into this home, we bring the courage to journey on after hard losses. Into this home, we bring our joy and gratitude for ordinary blessings. By our gathering, we bless this place. In its shelter, we know ourselves blessed. So come, friends, come, those of you gathered here with us in person and those of you gathered with us online, and let's worship together.
Good again. Couldn't make her proud, though I did my best. I feel like a mess. I feel like I'm stuck in the wrong skin. I feel like I'm sick, but I'm having trouble swallowing my medicine. Sunday, carry me down to the water, wash me clean. I'm still struggling. Sunday, bury me under the weight of who you need me to be. Can't you see I'm struggling? I keep God locked in a picture frame, so I feel a little better about my numbered days. Yeah, I confess, the questions and the answers seem to sound the same. I'm just like the rest, standing tall, pretending not to be afraid. Sunday, carry me down to the water, wash me clean. I'm still struggling. Sunday, bury me under the weight of who you need me to be. Can't you see I'm struggling? Sunday, come around, lift me up again. Never too proud for a helping hand. I've been feeling down. Can you heal me now? Sunday, come around, lift me up again. Never too proud for a helping hand. I've been feeling down. Can you heal me now? Sunday, carry me down to the water, wash me clean. Can't you see I'm struggling? Sunday, carry me down to the water, wash me clean. Can't you see I'm struggling?
Thank you, Lydia. The flaming chalice is the symbol of our Unitarian Universalist tradition, the liberal religious tradition to which this congregation belongs. I invite you to rise as you are able for the lighting of our chalice, and if you have a chalice at home, I invite you to light yours with me now. Will you please join me in reciting the words on the screen? As we kindle this flame, we recommit ourselves to the mission of this congregation, to build a Unitarian Universalist community that transforms lives and empowers people to serve the world. May the light of this flame be welcoming to all who seek a liberal religious home. Please be seated. Thank you. Our opening hymn this morning will be number 8, which is Mother Spirit and Father Spirit. And this morning, again, in light of the changing situation with the pandemic, we cannot sing, but we can hum. And so I invite you to hum along as John and Diane lead us.
Mother Spirit, Father Spirit, where are you? In the sky song, in the forest sounds your cry. What to give you, what to call you, what am I? Many drops are in the ocean deep and wide. Sunlight bounces off the ripples to the sky. What to give you, what to call you, who am I? I am empty, time flies from me, what is time? Dreams eternal, fears infernal, haunt my heart. What to give you, what to call you, oh my God. Mother Spirit, Father Spirit, take our hearts, take our breath and let our voices sing our parts. Take our hands and let us work to shape our hearts.
Well, good morning. I'm Sarah Ford-Knorr, one of your worship associates and a member of this congregation. If you're visiting us for the first time this morning, either in person or online, I'd like to offer you a special welcome. Here at the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Raleigh, we are intentionally inclusive, liberally religious, and actively serving the common good of our shared world. Whoever you are, and wherever you are on your own religious journey, you are welcome here. As Unitarian Universalists, you know that we seek wisdom and inspiration from many sources, but we affirm our own individual experience and conscience is the best authority for our beliefs. We are also committed to making our world more compassionate and more just, and we hope that you might join one of our many efforts to do so. If you're visiting us for the first time and you haven't already done so, I invite you to stop by our visitor stand. If you're here in person, immediately after the service, it's just right outside the sanctuary here. And if you're visiting us for the first time online, I invite you to fill out our visitor form at www.uufr.org/visitor form. And if you do this, you'll start receiving our weekly e-newsletter. So for those of us here in person, our social hour this morning will be outside again on the upper fellowship hall patio. And after you get your coffee, feel free to remain there or to wander all about, down to the lower courtyard or to our memorial gardens. Now, since we're not on Zoom, those of us here in the sanctuary, and we don't have our names printed below our faces, please remember to wear your name tag. And those are located now down on the lower floor by the lower entryway. For everybody online, please feel free to join us for our online social hour. And there are instructions about how to do that on our website. So I now invite you to meet and greet each other. So for those of us here, out of an abundance of caution, I'll remind you that we are not hugging or shaking hands, but we can greet each other with a wave, a nod, or a warm hello. And if you're online, I invite you to use the chat function to say hi. Good morning.
This is the time in our service when we acknowledge some of the joys and the sorrows of our community. Anyone is invited to email a joy or sorrow to joysandsorrows@uufr.org before 9 a.m. on Sunday. And anyone is also invited to light a candle and fill out a card before our service. And folks at home, you may share your joy or sorrow in the chat function on your screen. This morning, Sarah and I lit some candles for the people in Haiti, Afghanistan, and Chicago after yesterday's 7.2 magnitude earthquake in Haiti, the Taliban's violent takeover of Afghanistan, and the shooting of a young police officer in Chicago, a city already struggling to institute needed police reforms and accountability. We hold in our hearts the many, many people who are hurting, grieving, and afraid right now in the aftermath of these events, and pray that the responses to these events will ultimately bring safety, peace, and healing to these communities. I also have a concern to share that came in through email. Claire Drummel shares that Dennis Drummel is going to be undergoing a prostate cancer diagnostic biopsy procedure tomorrow. And she asks that we hold him in our prayers and in our hearts during this time of anxiety. And Becky Harper shares that her grandson Sam is 1 year old today. He is in Italy, though, and so she's never had a chance to meet him in person because of COVID. Happy birthday to Sam. And Becky, I hope that there will be a day soon when you can see him in person. As we reflect on these shared joys and sorrows, those fears and hopes and joys and sorrows in our own lives, let's be together now for a time of stillness and silence, opening ourselves up to that spirit between us, within us, and amidst us, called by many names but known to every human heart, that leads us toward a fuller experience of life. After the silence, we will remain seated and listen to Diane and John sing hymn number 15, The Lone Wild Bird. But now let's be together in stillness and in silence.
The Dalai Lama once remarked that generosity is the most natural outward expression of an inner attitude of compassion and loving kindness. Much of what we do here at UUFR is only possible because of the generous support that so many of you provide. Will the ushers please come forward to collect the offering? Whether you're at home or in the sanctuary, it's also possible to give using one of the methods that will be posted on the screen. And after the offertory, we'll have a brief update from our One Wake team. Please be generous. Thank you.
If you believe within your heart, you'll know that no one can change the path you must go. Believe what you feel and know you're right, because the time will come around when you'll say it's yours. Believe there's a reason to be. Believe you can make time stand still, and know from the moment you try, if you believe, I know you will. Believe in yourself right from the start. You'll have brains told you to, but believe in yourself. If you believe in yourself, just believe in yourself as I believe in you, in you.
Hi, my name is Chris Olson. I'm a member of this congregation. And listening to James Luther Adams' 5 Smooth Stones, and especially his one about creating a just and loving community, is a really interesting way to reflect on our community and UUFR and our social justice work. I'm very grateful and proud that we do a lot of excellent work that fits right into this, from food security to refugee support, anti-racism, environmental justice, and many other actions that help build that just and loving community. And we take personal responsibility and action and social action to do this. One ministry that I'm a part of is our One Wake ministry, where we partner with over 40 other local congregations and organizations in Wake County to tackle issues of systemic change and policy that no one congregation alone is big enough to accomplish. And these are things like affordable housing, creating living wage jobs and workforce development, education change. Really big issues facing our county, especially as we grow bigger. We have greater income inequality, property values and taxes are rising and risk forcing residents out and creating further inequality and division. Some specific actions One Wake is taking: they've identified over 100 acres of Raleigh and Wendell and property in other municipalities for affordable housing development. They're petitioning to create a allocation of a penny of the property tax in Cary from the budget to affordable housing, which would generate over $3 million for support there. They're supporting mobile home park residents in Cary and Wake Forest and elsewhere who are part of these few and remaining affordable communities that are getting forced out or even under predatory practices that are hurting their ability to survive there. So these are all really important, and you can learn more at onewake.org. But all of these require large support and voice to show our local leaders that these are important issues that we all care about, and in order to convince them to take action that we're asking for. So we have a campaign going through One Wake called 10,000 Strong. We're collecting 10,000 signatures from around the county saying that these are important issues we agree should be taken action on. And we've pledged to have over 200 UUFR members take that pledge. So we hope you can help us reach that goal or exceed it. And by all means, please share it with your friends and anyone else in your community. So that's at onewake.org/10,000strong. There's a table after the service where you can hear more about it and how to make that pledge. And we'll share that link in the chat too during service for those online. Really hope we can have your support, and thank you.
Excerpts from a thesis written years ago by the Reverend James Dennis Hunt, a Unitarian Universalist minister and the late husband of our own UUFR member, Jane Hunt. The thesis is titled James Luther Adams and His Demand for an Effective Religious Liberalism. Now, I understand that when the Reverend Hunt was writing this thesis, James Luther Adams was still alive, and he would send Reverend Hunt long letters reminding him not to leave things out, but always also sending his regards to Jane, who he referred to as Reverend Hunt's beloved. So some excerpts now from the thesis. Reverend Hunt explored how James Luther Adams' philosophies reaffirmed some elements of traditional liberal doctrines of the church, especially lay participation and an openness to new insights, while at the same time offering a critical view of what we as liberals perhaps have a low evaluation of institutional structures. He said Adams makes use of the conception of power, emphasizing the importance of institutional forms as an instrument of power, while at the same time seeking to heighten the power of the church by disciplines conformable with the character of voluntary democratic association. And Reverend Sasha is going to be taking a closer look at the idea of religious discipline on the one hand and its relationship to democratic institutions later. Regarding the idea of institutions as instruments of power, Hunt wrote that Adams believed the distinguishing feature of a religion is a doctrine of grace, a conception of the creative and transforming powers of being. What does that mean? Well, for James Luther Adams, faith was a recognition of powers and resources that are built into the structure of being, which form and shape the present, and which are available for forming and shaping the future. Religion is a quest for the utilization of these powers, Hunt wrote, and the characteristic feature of religion, a doctrine of grace, places the emphasis not on the form of religion, but on the powers which the form seeks to incorporate and release. Now, religion is a relationship to whatever a person or group believes to be ultimately reliable, the most important powers of existence, or those elements of reality that cannot be ignored with impunity. And what gives vitality to the whole enterprise is Adams' demand for meaningful participation in the decisive occurrences of our time, the points at which democracy and the spread of justice need to be deepened and extended. The great enemy of religion, Adams and I think Hunt asserted, is pseudo-spirituality, a religiousness that does not confront people with the demand for justice or the development of democratic forms of community. So, offering support to the liberal concern with social issues, Adams would insist that this concern can only be made effective if liberals adopt an appreciation of the role of voluntary association in the expression of those concerns. Prophetic liberal religion, like ours, has need of an effective strategy based on an associational conception of history. It must also have a sense of the availability of powers that can confront sources of evil. Prophetic concern must take institutional form if it's to be an effective expression of an ethical critique of society. By their groups you shall know them, Hunt wrote, and apart from groups they shall remain impotent. Which brings us back to Hunt's observation that for Adams, religion centers around the doctrine of grace and the necessity of discipline in the church. Because for Adams, discipline and commitment were the methods of religious activity. Discipline was a means by which grace is mediated, a means of appropriating divine power. The undisciplined, uncommitted group is ineffectual. But Adams and Hunt believed that a disciplined and committed group could still be liberal. So Adams' conception of the church stressed participation and the dispersion of power, the priesthood and the prophethood of all believers, voluntary association, and radical laicism offer means by which the structures of institutions can be kept open to new vitalities. And after our musical meditation, Reverend Sasha will explain all that.
Third and final sermon of this series. Our first 2 weeks, we looked at our Unitarian and Universalist religious roots, our Universalist religious roots with Hosea Ballou's Treatise on Atonement, and our Unitarian roots with William Ellery Channing's Baltimore Sermon. It's time now for us to leave the 19th century and enter into the later half of the 20th century to explore a paper by the most influential Unitarian Universalist theologian of that time, the late James Luther Adams. His paper, called Guiding Principles for Free Faith, was written in 1976. This was after World War II and the Holocaust had deeply shaken up the world's religious thinkers and called into question many of religious liberalism's core beliefs and commitments about human nature and social progress. Guiding Principles for Free Faith critiqued religious liberalism for the ways that it sometimes failed to respond effectively to social concerns, especially in Nazi Germany. The paper also named core concepts in religious liberalism that still have the power to help us rise to meet the challenges of each era in ways that protect and expand freedom and justice in the world. He called these ideas, these principles of a free faith, the 5 smooth stones of religious liberalism. And that title comes from the story in the first book of Samuel about David and Goliath. The story goes that when Israel was under attack by the Philistines, a giant, Goliath, was standing there in front of the army of the Israelites, and he challenged the Israelites to one-on-one combat to save their country. Even the king of Israel was too afraid to meet the powerful foe on the battlefield, but then a young Hebrew boy stepped forward, David, armed with only a sling, 5 smooth stones, and his faith. With these tools alone, the young David defeated the giant and saved his community from the evil that threatened it. And religious liberalism offers 5 smooth stones that can help us to confront and overcome injustice in the world. James Luther Adams wrote that the first smooth stone of religious liberalism is revelation is continuous. Meaning has not been finally captured. Nothing is complete. And right now, the whole world is living the truth of this principle. Together, we are grappling to come to terms with the COVID-19 pandemic. We're working hard all the time to make sense of new information. We're trying to make good choices in light of that information, and we're struggling to make meaning out of our experiences in this very hard, trying, and confusing time. Every day, it seems, new scientific findings are coming out about this disease. We are experiencing for ourselves the truth that what we human beings know about the world or think that we know is not so much static, but in a constant state of flux. And as a result, what we do with that knowledge is also shifting as new information comes out. A few weeks ago, I could say truthfully, I trust the science, and that is why I am comfortable removing my mask now that I'm vaccinated. And now with the latest information that has been revealed, I can say equally truthfully, I trust the science, and that is why I prefer to wear my mask even though I am vaccinated. It is important to know, however, that James Luther Adams was not talking just about scientific knowledge when he spoke of this idea of revelation as continuous. As a Unitarian and then Unitarian Universalist Christian, he also was talking about God and the revelation of that God in history. Although Adams identified as Christian, I think that his understanding of God is one that many of us Unitarian Universalists of other theological perspectives can embrace. God for Adams is ultimate reality. He described God as the inescapable, commanding reality that sustains and transforms all meaningful existence. In a way, you can think of God as the laws of nature, the laws that give rise to all that is, was, will be, could have been, or might yet be. Not just physical things like protons and planets, but also things like love and the process of learning and growing to be more loving. God for Adams is the very characteristics underlying the entire cosmos that makes protons, planets, love, and growth possible in the first place. God is also that reality which governs their nature and the dynamics of their emergence into and their actions within the universe. So a way to think about this is that we are as we are because ultimate reality is as it is. And so often we hear the exact opposite. We hear that all of creation was designed specifically to fit our human needs and that this is a sign that God exists. But Adams flipped that around on its head. The nature of the universe is not dependent on our shared human nature. Human nature instead depends upon the nature of the universe, the nature of ultimate reality. And for Adams, that ultimate reality wasn't created by God, but is in fact God. It is that ultimate reality, that God, which continually reveals itself to us in ever new forms of being that all point back to their divine origin. God is revealed to us in history, revealed in the sciences, revealed in each and every being, revealed in our experiences, and revealed in the very dynamics of life as it changes and unfolds all around us. The observation that reality is constantly in the process of being revealed to us helps religious liberalism guard against both tyranny over the mind as well as political tyranny over bodies and lives. It guards us from tyranny by offering resistance to idolatries of the mind and spirit, as our Unitarian Universalist fifth source puts it, as well as resistance to idolatries of blood and soil, as Adams has stated. You have to understand that idolatry is quite simply substitution of the part for the whole and commitment to the part instead of the whole. Idolatries of mind can harm us when we cling to partial truth and ignore its larger context. And take, for example, perhaps a neighbor who believes that the COVID-19 pandemic is not that serious and that's not a very dangerous disease that we need to protect ourselves from. And they might believe this for somewhat legitimate reasons. They might believe that because they personally caught COVID and they didn't get very ill, and friends that they know didn't get very ill, that therefore their experience is universal. And so perhaps on the basis of that limited experience, they lobby their legislators, our legislators, to resist instituting public safety measures. And meanwhile, across Wake, Franklin, Johnston, Harnett, and Lee counties, hospitals are filling up, and there are now only 12 staffed ICU beds left in that entire region. This hypothetical neighbor worshiped the part for the whole. They mistook a partial truth that was true for them personally for the full picture, and they made decisions and commitments based on that erroneous belief that can harm countless other people. So idolatries of the mind can kill, and so too can idolatries of the blood and the soil, like racism and nationalism, which worship one race or one country over all of humanity. Religious liberalism resists harmful idolatries with the first smooth stone. The universe is so much bigger than we can ever fully know. Partial truths will give way to deeper and broader truths. God, the ultimate reality that is continually generating new things, is constantly in the process of breaking through the illusions, lies, and idols that distract us from more complete conviction and worthy commitments. James Luther Adams wrote that the second smooth stone of religious liberalism is the principle that all relations between persons ought ideally to rest on mutual free consent and not on coercion. Free choice is a principle without which religion or society or politics cannot be liberal. The liberal seeks in the words of prophets, in the deeds of saintly men and women, and in the growing knowledge of nature and human nature provided by science, meanings that evoke the free loyalty and conviction of people exposed to them in open discourse. So this smooth stone is perhaps the one that is the most familiar to us as modern Unitarian Universalists. People often come to Unitarian Universalism seeking freedom. Some seek freedom of belief and conscience, like you heard in our welcome today. These are often folks who are tired of being in communities where truth, somebody else's truth, is being shoved down their throats, a truth that they themselves just can't swallow. And some people come to Unitarian Universalism seeking political freedom, such as reproductive freedom or the right to marry, which many UU congregations support. And these different notions of freedom are what gives religious liberalism its name. Liberal comes from the Latin word meaning free. Liberalism works for communities in a world where people are free. Adams described the third smooth stone of religious liberalism as the moral obligation to direct one's effort toward the establishment of a just and loving community. The holy thing in life is the participation in those processes that give body and form to universal justice. The community of justice and love is not an ethereal fellowship that is above the conflicts and turmoils of the world, but one that takes shape in nature and history. So I spoke a moment ago about religious liberalism's commitment to freedom from coercion in human relations. And this is not just freedom from something, however, but freedom also for something. It is a freedom that is intended to be used, not just for private ends, but also to build a more just, compassionate, and sustainable community. And I know that there's a tension that you're probably hearing here. We have affirmed the belief on the one hand that people ought to be free in body, heart, mind, and spirit to live as their conscience calls them to live. And we have affirmed that we must relate to one another in non-coercive ways. And so then, where is the freedom in a moral requirement to use our energies to work for a better world? Who gets to just tell us that's what we have to do with our freedom? It may be admirable to work for justice, and it is certainly necessary in order to have a more just, loving, and sustainable world. But are we actually required, morally required, to roll up our sleeves and create it? If a person wants to use their freedom to, say, do nothing at all, but lounge on the beach and sunbathe for their whole life, separate from all the cares and concerns of the world, rather than working with others to make the world better, are they somehow failing to fulfill their moral obligation if they identify as a religious liberal? So here's the thing. We can't have one type of freedom without the other. We can't have freedom from things without using our freedom for something. If we are not morally required to roll up our sleeves to liberate one another, then we cannot actually have the very freedom that we claim to promote. It is like saying that we deserve to eat, but then refusing to open our mouths and chew our food. We go hungry when we should be fed. So this is the third smooth stone then that speaks to the mechanisms that pursue freedom and those disciplines of the church that we talked about earlier in the reading. But these mechanisms are not just human mechanisms like participation in political processes or volunteerism, but they are also divine mechanisms that are found in the fabric of being. You may remember that Adams described God as that reality that works in nature, history, and thought, and under certain conditions creates human good in human community. And he went on to say that in this sense, we are not free. We are not free to work without the sustaining, commanding reality. We can't do it. We are free only to obstruct it or to conform to the conditions that it demands for growth. So as religious liberals, while we have the ability to use our freedom to obstruct the conditions that allow a better world to come into being, we have the moral obligation to use our efforts to meet those conditions and create more just and loving communities so that freedom for all can come into being. Adam's fourth smooth stone is the principle that as religious liberals, we deny the immaculate conception of virtue, and we affirm the necessity of social incarnation. Anything that exists effectively in history must have form, and the creation of a form requires power. It requires not only the power of thought, but also the power of organization and the organization of power. So we do not simply affirm with the 19th century Unitarian minister Theodore Parker that the arc of the moral universe is long but bends toward justice. We also know that human beings have to actually do the hard work of meeting the conditions that allow the universe to bend toward justice. And in order to do that, it is not enough to simply cultivate inner virtues, however powerful that they might be, in inspiring outward individual and collective actions of compassion and justice. We also have to join together to create institutions that embody and enable our values, institutions with the longevity to outlast any particular movement or moment, however powerful an inspiration that movement or moment might be. And it's like the difference between a spark ignited by flint and steel, and a bonfire warming a community on a winter night. A spark is bright, but it is short-lived. Without leaves and logs to sustain it, a spark won't last, and it certainly won't warm even a single person, let alone an entire community. But a bonfire has a structure that allows it to burn hot and bright even on the longest and coldest night. And those of you who were scouts growing up, maybe think back to those camping days when you were taught how to make a fire. Those twigs and branches and leaves all had to be gathered up and arranged in a particular way in that fire pit in order to allow the spark to catch, to ignite the flame, and to build and sustain the fire. So in order to create more just and loving communities, we need institutions that organize our momentary power into something that is effective and long-lasting. And so here locally, One Wake is an example of this kind of institution. We heard from Chris Olson about our congregation's One Wake core team's efforts with the larger One Wake organization to participate in the 10,000 strong campaign. And the 10,000 strong campaign seeks to create more affordable housing in our local communities by leveraging the fall elections. Those of you who have ever been to a One Wake training know that the idea of organization of power is central to One Wake's method for creating change. They understand that in order to create more loving and just communities, we must create institutions in government and in society that embody justice and actually demonstrate what a loving community looks like. One Wake operates on the principle that the power to create meaningful, positive change in the world is not something that is ethereal, to use James Luther Adams' term. It is an inner virtue or an inspiring idea or a moral conviction, although those things can help to create the kind of power that One Wake believes makes change happen. For One Wake, institutional power is simply organized people and organized money. And to be sure, the other kinds of power, virtue and vision, conviction, and so on, are important too, especially when getting the people and the money to the table in the first place. But when comes time to confront the institutions, individuals, and structures in our society that obstruct the creation of a more just and sustainable community, you need not only people and money, but also organized people and money. One Wake's 45 member organizations, including this congregation, are currently working to bring together 10,000 people for the fall municipal elections to get affordable housing wins that our community needs. So it's not enough for us to simply desire a vague, better world for ourselves and one another, or to warmly send thoughts and prayers out into the universe for its creation, or even to just work for it individually on our own in our private lives. We have to create specific institutions, the kind of institutions that embody and bring into the world the particular kinds of goodness that we want to create. We have to let our warm hearts and our open minds move us to roll up our sleeves to work for change. And we have to come together to build and create effective institutions that bring the better world that we want into being. As James Luther Adams said, virtue is not merely a spiritual thing disconnected from embodied life in this world. Goodness must be socially incarnated. My friends, I would like to end with James Luther Adams' fifth and final smooth stone of religious liberalism, which speaks for itself and should have the last word. There is something in the genuine liberal perspective that, while recognizing the tragic nature of the human condition, continues to live with a dynamic hope. The affirmative answer of prophetic religion, which may be heard in the very midst of the doom that threatens like thunder, is that history is a struggle in dead earnest between justice and injustice, looking toward the ultimate victory in the promise and the fulfillment of grace. Amen. Blessed be. May it be so. And now our closing hymn this morning is number 318, We Would Be One. And I invite you to remain seated and to hum along as John and Diane sing.
We would be one as now we join in singing our hymn of love to pledge ourselves anew to that high cause of greater understanding of who we are and what in us is true. We would be one in living for each other to show to all a new community. We would be one in building for tomorrow a nobler world than we have known today. We would be one in searching for that meaning which binds our hearts and points us on our way. As one we pledge ourselves to greater service, with love and justice strive to make us free.
It is time now to bring our time of worship to a close, but as we extinguish this chalice flame, its light will continue to burn in our hearts. As we go out into our daily lives, let's remember the words of Unitarian Universalist musician and environmental activist Matt Meyer. May we go forward in purposeful rhythm, that we may give voice to the melody of our imaginations, the music of our souls, and the possibilities of a just world as we might together create it. Go in peace.